Hi, friends. Welcome. It is week 14. It's the day before the belt exam. Just a couple of reminders. Please make sure you do your discussion questions. Please make sure you do your core assignments. Just as a reminder for those of you that are watching the recording, tomorrow the belt exam does open up as long as you've got 90% of your core assignments completed. In the morning, I will be sending out an email that says, hey, X, Y, or Z here, here's all the things you need to know. Here's some tips and tricks. Also, here's your belt exam code. It was asked in office hour, and it's a great question. What if in the morning you haven't got them complete, but you get them complete in the afternoon? What you can do is just send me an email and say, hey, I was able to complete it. Please send me a code. And I'll say, okay, great. And then I'll send you a code. And then you can do that and kind of get started on the exam. That said, if you do it in like Saturday morning and you want a code, as long as there's a TA available, you can just go in the Discord and say, hey, can anybody give me a belt exam code? And then a TA can hop in and they can give you codes as well. So they'll be available to do that. Just as a reminder, my encouragement, it's not a requirement. I know some instructors do require it. I don't. Do recipes before you do the exam. So if you haven't done recipes, don't try to take the exam this weekend. Try to get recipes done. And then once that's done, then go ahead and try, next week to take the exam. Again, I'd say my encouragement is for you to have your first exam attempt done by Wednesday at the latest, just so you can get a feel for it, so you can understand. That way also, if you're able to do another one, let's say you do need a retake, you have the weekend to work on it. So I would encourage you, it's not a mandatory thing. As a reminder, you get up to 3 chances. So you don't, if you wait until Tuesday or Wednesday to take your first, you will not get 3 chances. You're kind of, forewent the ability to take 3 chances. But if you kind of start now, then you get up to 3 chances if you need it to take the exam. Each exam is different. So it's not like, if you're doing a retake, it's not the same exam again. You will have a different exam, different criteria, different things to do. But something very, very similar to kind of they're all around the same basis. And again, we went through it all on Tuesday. We walked through the entire grading rubric that I'm going to use for you. So that way you, have access to that and you are able to kind of get prepared and say, okay, this is where we pointed at actually in our code where we completed, what I'm looking for, the things that you need to do. So there should be no confusion, no surprises, anything like that. You should be able to kind of know what to expect and what to do. And again, that's in this video right here. Any questions on the exam, what to expect? Your code will be good. Just as a reminder, I've said this before, but your code is not just good for this weekend. It's good all the way up until Wednesday. Remember, Wednesday's the last day for any sort of turn in, but it'll be good all the way up through then. So even if you, if you want to hold on to it, you don't need to request a new code. It's just whenever you're ready, you can take it. Any questions on the exam? What to expect this weekend? How you guys feeling about it?
Personally, I would say I'm feeling a little confident than before since I'm retaking.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Well, today is our algo and demo lecture. So I thought we would just do some algorithms together. Oops. So that way, we can continue to build on this knowledge. You guys will go straight into projects and algorithms. Unfortunately, I will not be with you for projects and algorithms. I got a new, was kind of told uh, yesterday that I'm actually going to be teaching a different cohort. So you guys will uh, get Andrew. Andrew rules. Andrew rocks. There's a new Michael Jackson movie coming out, and he got hired to play John Lennon. So he rules. He's super cool. So you can say that you're getting taught by a movie star because he's in the big movie and he is John Lennon. So um he will be reaching out to you Friday Friday the 26th with all the information for the new class. Cool.
Because I think the other on Tuesday you said that you would be teaching, but
Yeah, it
that
yesterday I got my new assignment and I was told I was not. So I was
Okay.
teaching up Tuesday, and then yesterday they finalized the schedule and I'm taking over a totally different thing. So
Oh, bummer.
I know, I'm
Uh,
bummed, but I will still come to graduation, so it'll still be fun.
So how was the graduation like, Will? Since we're doing everything virtual.
Yeah, so what it'll basically be is you'll come and you can invite anybody you want. So, if you're Jeffrey, if your wife wants to come, she's super welcome to. Just give her the Zoom link. And then you'll share your projects, share what you did, things that you kind of reflect on and look back on in the course. Andrew will say some nice things. You'll get a certificate that has your name, the stacks that you completed, just kind of your official, diploma, if you will. So we try to make it fun. You guys have a smaller class, but still, it'll still be fun. And anybody can come
Um,
to it, which is really cool.
All right.
Go ahead, Kevin.
so yeah, so what will the final stack be like? Like how long will it be and what will be taught in it exactly?
Yeah, so we talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
You're good. It's 4 weeks long. It's your projects and algorithm stack. Now, what it's going to cover is it's going to cover so there's it's a two-headed monster, if you will. The first portion is you are going to be building a personal project. So that's something that you're going to build. It's basically a CRUD application. What you'll do is you'll write up, here's what I want to build. Here's the features. It needs to have login and registration. And it needs to, it can be sort of anything you want. It could be a game. It could be kind of anything you're interested in, as long as it's using Python, because that's the language that you guys were taught. I've seen games. I've seen cool like piano things. Like there's as much creativity as you want. Now, I would say that my encouragement, usually to students, is that if you don't want to go into gaming, I usually say refrain from creating a game, because though the idea of like object-oriented programming can translate, it still just isn't you want to kind of build something in the industry you want to go into. So unless you want to get into gaming, plus Python's not really the most optimal for gaming, so I usually try to say don't, but if you wanted to, that's great. And that's going to be 2 weeks. The first 2 weeks is your personal project. It's a 4-week course. You will also have, for the last 2 weeks, you'll also have, sorry, my allergies are killing me today, guys. The last 2 weeks will be a group project. Now, because it's such a small cohort, you guys will likely just be in one group working on a project together, creating something that would be useful, learning things like GitHub and being able to kind of work as a team. And what does that look like? Because it's challenging and hard, but part of a necessary part of working with a team and working on code. So that's what you'll do the last 2 weeks. Concurrently, you will be learning about algorithms. So you'll be learning about foundational things, kind of a revamp of lists and for loops. A lot of the stuff that we're doing, I'm kind of just taking optional assignments. So that way you're keeping in track with this. So like all these algorithms that we've recently been doing is from some optional assignments in the next stack. But again, it's the beginning is to go over for loops and arrays or lists. And then from there, you'll get into some more complex data structures. You talk about like singly linked lists and doubly linked lists. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in there that kind of teaches you all about the different data structures, because depending on the problem, there's different data structures that give, better benefits. You have, A is better than B for this problem, but sometimes B is better than A for for another problem. So you learn about those. So what your core assignments will be is working on your project, but then you'll have like one, data structure algorithm homework assignment, where you're, doing something with kind of coding, data structure problems, things to kind of prepare you for your whiteboard or technical interview. And then at the end of that, you'll present um, your projects, and then you'll graduate and you'll be done and you'll be off in the real world.
But that's all, so we present our assignments online, right? It's not, we don't go to anything physical.
No, you don't go to anything physical. Yeah, it's just
What
an
ab- what
online
what
thing.
about the graduation? Is the graduation online or anything?
The graduation is also online.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and it's all within, I can't remember if it's on Thursday or Friday. I think it's on your class day anyway. So it's not like it's an interruption to your schedule. So, if you work and you've set up your schedule in such a way that you're available this night, but not tomorrow, I think it's on Thursdays, for you.
Do we
So
get do
go.
do we get some kind of certificate or something?
You do, you'll get a graduation certificate. That's exactly it. They'll have your name, all the courses that you took, how you did. And then that's a great tool that you can put on like LinkedIn and on your resume if you wanted, or at least you could highlight it on your resume. You wouldn't necessarily send it in with your resume, but you would highlight that on your resume that you completed this. And then if they ask for it, you'd have that available.
Okay.
Yeah. Great questions. Any other questions about kind of what to expect this next week and a half?
Yeah, do we get the diplomas in the mail or is it in email? Via
It's
email.
a PDF, yeah. So you can print that off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's a PDF. You'll get access to it. Any other questions, my friends? Again, next week we'll be talking about APIs. So that'll be fun. That's what we'll be doing and building that out. These lectures are kind of free reign for instructors to teach on things that we think are important. And again, my encouragement or my thought is what you need to know and what you need to understand is how to integrate an API into your code, because it's going to be used all over the place. Even internal companies might have, team 1 and team 2. Team 1, even though they're the same company, might just use team 2's API to get information because they don't need to merge the code base. We just need to, have an API that can kind of connect with one another. An API is really what we're building, right? Our server, our Flask server is in theory an API. We make some sort of request to it. It has access to some data, and then it gives us back a response, right? That's really what an API is. So that's what we've built. So companies have that. Sometimes they're a little bit more intense. Last week or on Tuesday, we looked at Yelp using Google Maps. And so that's a popular API. Spotify is a great one. There's free ones like the Pokemon API, Star Wars API. So we'll do something like that. There's a weather API. So that one's usually pretty fun too. So you can request maybe a city or location that gives you back the weather at that time, like a 3-day forecast sort of thing. So if you wanted to integrate that into your projects, you can. And that's why I like to do APIs as well. It's because they are great for when you're creating a personal project. It's a great thing to have when when you have a personal project, having an API when somebody spins it up, if they're going to look at it, if it's hosted, then can make it a little bit more impressive, right? You didn't actually write the code, but it's a little bit more impressive. These are great questions. Any other questions, friends?
Oh, yeah, one more question, Will. So let's
Yeah, of
say
course.
okay, let's say like you have your exam, right?
Mhm.
You took care of the VS Code part of modularization.
Mhm.
And you already took care, even before you start, like you already take care of like the log and registration.
Mhm.
So where would you start if I was to ask? Would you start with your controllers or models according to the way you would tackle it? I mean, you by yourself.
Yeah, that's a really great question. Hey, Estrella. What Jeffrey just asked
Hey.
is, you guys can come with a working login and registration. That works. So which means that you can come with a working user model, with a working user controller, working validations, all of that. The things I would do first and foremost when I get the exam, let's say it's recipes, right? Let's say that this is your exam. Have a user that has a first name, a last name, an email, a password. and I want to be able to create, read, update, and delete a user. Cool. Let's say that this is your belt and I get this. I would say, okay, great. My first thing I would do is say, does my login and registration match what the exam says? And that is, I believe we're going to have, just kind of like an internal secret. I believe it's just going to be first name, last name, email, password, confirm password. Some of them might have like age or, favorite food or something like that. Right. And so that's how I would first look at it is I'd open my exam and make sure that first name, last name, email, password, that is the attributes, or those are the attributes that I have in my model on top of my created at, my updated at, and my ID, right? If that is the case, then great. If it's not, then I need to update accordingly. I need to go into my ERD. I need to update that. I need to go into my model. I need to update that. I need to go into my controller and update that, right? And so I just need to go in all these different spaces and update that. That's how I'd approach it first. Then what I would do is I would see the other thing. Because you're going to have a one-to-many relationship. So I'd say, okay, what is the other thing I have? And here I see recipes. And so I would say, okay, I'm going to go in and build in my ERD. I'm going to build out, a recipe table. And that recipe has got a name, a description, instructions, under 30 minutes, yes or no, or date and a date, right? And so I need to have all of those things in there. Cool. I would create my ERD and then I would go in and say, okay, great. I know that this still works, or I know that this works. We're good. Our database is connected. I can create users, all that fun stuff. Then I would build out my recipe model. Because you can build out your controller, but it can't do anything until you have your model. So I build out my model, make sure I have my attributes, and then I would start looking and saying, okay, here, once they register and or log in, we need to take them to this page because that's what these arrows are doing. And so this is some sort of dashboard. I'd say, okay, great. Let me build that out or build out the functionality. So if I'm looking at this, I'm saying, okay, I need all recipes. And this is my biggest encouragement is don't just jump into coding, really lay out what do you need for each page and then do that, right? So if I'm looking at this, not only do I see that I need all recipes, but I need that it's posted by, which tells me that I need some sort of join, right? I need to be able to have my recipe table. It's going to have some sort of user ID on it as a foreign key. And so I need to know, okay, how would I do that? So I need to do a join. And then here, because I've got like view recipe or edit and delete, I know that there's some additional functionality. So I would first work on, okay, what is my query to get this information? Right. So in my model, I would create my, get recipe with user. And then get all recipes with users or something like that. Get recipes with users. I would create that, make sure I have that, and then put that in, make sure that this page is complete, right? And then I would go, okay, and maybe you create this query, but nothing's going to happen, right? So you could sit and say, well, do I even have this page? Do I have the ability? No. So let me actually go and I'm going to create this create page. Make sure again, my ERD matches all this. I have a model that matches all this. Maybe I have like a create recipe. Check my database. Okay, yep, I see that it's in there. I'm able to create a recipe. Maybe I want to get it by ID. Am I able to do that? Yes, I am. Okay, great. And so really what I would say my encouragement is find what's easiest for you. After I started talking, realize this is probably the more complicated one, right? Where you have to do the recipe with the user, with some of this other functionality. It might be a little complicated. Take the easy wins. If you've already got this made, great. Sorry, again, my allergies are killing me today. If you already have this made, great. Maybe work on the create recipe or add a new recipe page. Fill that out, put in your model, make your HTML. So I usually go model, then HTML, and then controller. and then, build this out, test it. Are you seeing something in your database? You are, great. Okay, maybe I might go to this next page and say, okay, now I want to retrieve that information. I still see that if you see right here, posted by Kai, that there still is a, get one recipe with user, something like that. So I would do that page, work on the edit, which is similar to this, right? And then maybe the last thing I'm going to do is this last big part. So again, going to the ERD, working your model, and then just taking the little wins, the easy wins. You can't really do this page until you can create a recipe, right? You can't edit a recipe till you create a recipe. You can't have a table of recipes till you create a recipe. So I'd probably, my first thing I would do is start with creating a recipe. And then just work with whatever's easiest for you. If it's update recipe, if you're like, I'm in the zone, I just want to do this, that's fine. And then maybe you move to this or however you want to do it. If you want to do the dashboard after you create, that's also okay, right? There's no perfect thing. It's just whatever you think is easiest and the smallest lift at the time.
So would the radio buttons or any check boxes, would they pertain to session or
They would
the
not.
database?
Nope. The only thing that you're going to need for session is you're wanting to see who is registered or logged in. So you're going to be doing, when they register, you put their ID in session. When they log in, you put their ID in session. And then what you'll do here for this portion of the assignment, you get a different color. For this portion, right? We're going to have some sort of conditional check in our Jinja, which remember Jinja is in my HTML, my quickly percent sign. And I'm just going to check in this row, right? Because I'm going to have some for loop that's iterating through. On this part, I'm going to say, hey, if the user ID of session equals the user ID of this row, because we have that information, because we're doing, sorry, that was a terrible circle. Because we're doing join, if those match, then I want to show this edit and delete. Else, I just show this. So, and we did that in class.
But for the welcome, Alana, for the welcome, Alana, spam, Musabi, that's session, correct?
No. Here, welcome, Alana, that'll be session. Spam Musabi is that you will be clicking on view recipe that will have some sort of URL with an
Right.
ID in there. So that is not session.
But
And
what
then you
about
just-
the stuff that's in that? What about the stuff that's in the box?
Nope. Again, that is, you're going to be doing here's your ID. You're going to have some sort of query in your model that's get one
Okay.
recipe by ID, right? And you're going to have to, if you look at this welcome Alana is session, right? So what we're saying is, if that's saying that, then in my HTML, I want to, let me just actually pull up our code so that way we can kind of view this.
So it would be request.form then.
No.
I would say go back to some of your codes that you did to kind of refresh on how it looked. That helps me personally, on how I pulled the information for, the user ID with the user, because you have to connect them from when you created it and
Right. Right.
from how it's created in MySQL too. You understand? So that's what I'm saying. Like if you go to some
Yeah.
of your past assignments, it would show you it should help you because we've done some of this, because I had to go back and kind of like, oh yeah, I remember doing that, but how did I do that? So I went to a past assignment and
Yeah.
looked for it. And that helps me. I don't know if you should have your works saved so you can kind of go back even to like
Yeah.
when you already submitted it. That's what I've been doing, Kevin, to be honest with you. And some stuff that I'm not sure of, I just Google and depending on what it is, like I'm trying to do this with Bootstrap or whatever, and that's how I've gotten most of my stuff solved,
Yeah.
I guess you can say.
Yeah, and so if we're thinking about just like this dashboard here, right, where it's got welcome Alana and then
Yeah.
it's got all of these things here. Oops, wrong code. Here we have this all games, get all games, and maybe
Yeah.
this is the query that gets all the games with my user, so my join. But if I want that user, right, I could say something like user equals, and then I can bring in. So I'm gonna have to bring in from I think it's game app dot models dot user. Yep, import user. Right, so now I can use any sort of these ones here, right? So if I just want to get one user.
Yeah.
So then what I can say is, in that regard, I can say user equals user dot get one user, and I'm passing in session user ID. Or if it, let's see how I've set it up. I might have it as, yeah, pass an ID. So then I might say something like this. The reason I'm saying this is, remember when we're passing this in, this is looking for a key called ID. And right now, what I'm doing here is I'm saying session user ID. That's not going to work. That's going to say user ID. And so what I would do is I would say ID equals, and then I would say, or user, sorry, user equals ID right? And then here, all I would
Right.
say is user equals get one with user. And so what this is going to do is now my HTML is going to have access to user. And that's my keyword. And what it's going to do is it's going to go into my user model, run this get one user, and we're passing in this dictionary of ID and its value. So whoever's currently in session. And so it's going to come here, it's going to run that, it's going to give me back that instance. And so on my actual HTML, like let's say I went to templates and dashboard. If that's the case, what I could say is something like this. I could say, H1, hello, user dot first name. Oops. And that would say hello, Alana. And so that's how they're different, right? All games is this one, but I can pass in if I'm just wanting, so in that case where I'm wanting hello, Alana, welcome, Alana, I can just put that, should minimize this for a second. I can just run this on each. And then now I can say, the user and say, hey, Alana, or welcome, Alana, or whatever. So this part is session. This other part is coming from your query in your database. And because it says posted by, that tells us we're going to need to do a join.
Okay. But so basically with the add a new recipe, you're typing your the name, the description, and then what is that? What's the box below that?
Instructions.
Instructions. Right.
Mhm.
So you type all that, and then in under 30 minutes, yes, no, and then everything, and then you hit submit, and then it
Mhm.
says welcome whoever, and whatever you typed in is what it's supposed to display. Is that correct on the screen to the right?
So this after creation redirect to dashboard, right? So once you type everything in, it'll come up and then it will, again, your dashboard's gonna have a query where it's getting everything that you created, right? So it's gonna redirect to dashboard. and then dashboard is going to get all video games. So it's going to have this new game you just created. Now, the last thing I'll say is don't forget a secret we can do is in my actual game form, we did this. We can create a hidden input, and whoever's in session, which happens when they register, log in, and we have to prevent them from navigating to our stuff. Remember, the way we do that is by saying things like, we talked about it like a couple weeks ago, where we were saying things, if user not in session, user ID not in session, that tells us they're not logged in, we redirect them, right? So we know that if they're creating something, they have to be logged in. And so we can pass in that value because there's going to be some sort of foreign key associated. So when somebody is creating this recipe, we want to know, well, who created it? So that way we could say posted by. So it's just a reminder there. And it's automatically going to go here. And then if we click view recipe, then it does another query because this view recipe is going to have the ID in there. How we have it like this, right? It's going to have that ID in there. It's going to go to game / let's say edit, just to kind of make it easy. It's going to go to video games / edit, where we're going to take in that ID from our URL. We call it ID. We get one game, and then we render the template and we pass it in, right? That's how, and we're going to have to do the same thing. If you wanted to come here, we would do, get one game, plus we do our user thing that we did earlier. So that way we can get the person in session and this, right? So we get both. So again, I would encourage, go through this. There's a video associated with it. Go through this, make sure you can do this. Cause if you just super transparent, if anybody struggles with this, you're going to struggle with the exam. So that's why I was saying, if you haven't done that yet, take this weekend to do it, to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to knock this out. And then after that, after this weekend, and after you do recipes, get help with TAs or whoever, then you can kind of take the exam next week. And that's not required. That's just my encouragement. Okay. I do want to do an algo. Really the belt exam is the most important thing. So are there any other questions on that? And if not, we'll jump into the algo.
I was just for me was trying to remember how to connect them, so I was looking for your video on when you connected Marley and you made it pop up. So that's what I was actually looking for. And I saw the time. I'm like, oh, I gotta log in.
All
Go to
good.
class.
There's something that I'm kind of unclear about that assignment. If you could go back really quick, because yeah. So for the add new recipe, where does the welcome and then your name, where does the one on the bottom right hand corner, where does that come from? I
You
don't.
mean this one?
Yeah.
That's what we were just talking about, where you
Right. But
and I don't want to spend too much more time on this, Kevin. If we need to, if you need to meet with the TA or meet with me, we can, just so everybody else's time. But we have this value here that
okay.
allows us to
All
get
right.
our
Okay.
user. So
All
here's
right.
like as if it was a dashboard HTML, like how it has this. Welcome Alana there, but you would just have that same thing. So whatever's calling that specific, like let's say if we have get one game here and we wanted to get that specific game, and maybe it was just viewing, one game, we would just pass in also, we would do the same thing where we would say, maybe we already have data here and I could say user data equals this, and I say ID. And the reason I'm saying ID here is because I need it to match whatever my query is. I say session user ID. And then I say, user equals user data. Or user dot get one user data. And so I'm passing in this ID to get that one user. And then at the top, I could say, hello on user dot first name. That's how we would handle that. Cool. All right. For the algorithm today, we've got a pretty simple one. I've got another one if we want to, if we get to it, but this is given an array, again, given a list, same thing, array and list are the same thing. Just array and is a list in JavaScript. Write a function that changes all positive numbers in the array to big. So if we have an example, it'd be something like this. An example would be something like this. Let's say we have it, make it big. -1, 3, 5, -5 returns the same array, but it's changed to -1, big, -5. So there's some key things. There's some key things in this. It says, given a list, we know what to do there. Write a function that changes all positive numbers in the array to big. Now notice it doesn't say write a function that returns a new list where all of the positive numbers are big. It says this is changes, right? And then in the example, it says returns the same array. So we know that we're going to do this in place, meaning that we're not creating anything new. We're doing it in place. So we're affecting the original array there, our original list. So we always start with pseudocode. So who wants to go first with what's the first thing we're going to do?
Create a function.
Yeah. Function that takes in a list. Perfect. What's the next thing we're going to do?
So I think that, let me see, biggie size. Ready create a list. So
So we're first going to create a new create a function that takes in the list. What's our next step?
will that be a list with a parameter? Will? Or will it just go straight to the loop?
Yeah, so takes in a list is just, it's a function with a parameter. So you're exactly right.
Oh, okay.
And then the next thing is, yeah, we'll create a for loop that iterates through the list. Okay. As we're iterating, Kevin, what are we going to do? What's our for loop going to do? Maybe I'll tab this over because it's within our for loop. Let's think about what are we trying to see? Or what are we trying to determine? Trying to determine if a number is positive or not, right?
Yeah.
So how would we do that? What do we use to kind of see the value if it's greater than or
Greater
equal?
than or equal to 0.
Yeah, what do we call that? Yeah, if we do something like that.
An operator?
Yeah, so we're using operators, but it's called a conditional statement, right? We're using
You
an if
write a
statement.
conditional statement.
Yeah, so use conditional statement. to see if it is greater than or equal to 0. Cool. So Jeffrey, if it is greater than or equal to 0, what are we going to do?
So that's gonna result into a Boolean.
Yeah, it's going to give us a Boolean. It's either going to be true or false. It's greater than 0 or greater than or equal to 0, or it's not, meaning it's
So,
negative.
so we're gonna print.
Well, if it's true, what do we want to do? We're checking to see if it's a positive number. And if it is a positive number, what do we want to do?
You want to skip it.
Do we want to skip a positive number? Is that what the question's
Well,
asking for?
it says, oh no, it's changing it to all positive numbers.
Yeah.
So
So if it's true,
then
what do we
they'll
want
have
to do?
then they'll have to print.
I'm not quite printing yet. We're iterating through and it's going to check and it's going to say, is this a positive, is this greater than or equal to 0? It's not, right? Because it's less than 0. Okay. Goes to the next one. Is this greater than or equal to 0? It is. What do we want to do?
I'm not sure. I'm thinking. I'm looking at my notes.
If it's positive, what are we doing? What's the question asking?
Gonna change all positive.
Yeah, we're going to change it to big, right? So if true, change value to big. And then once that for loop is done running, here is where we would, print list with new values. Okay. So, Jeffrey, what's the first thing I'm going to write here?
So we're gonna create a function.
Mm-hmm. So we'll say def, make
Change.
it big. And then what do I do here?
I just say
Brackets like list.
Yeah, we'll say listy. Remember, list is a keyword.
Oh yeah, listy.
Yep.
We're gonna return.
We're not returning yet. Remember, once a function hits return, it's done running.
now we'll be creating the loop, so we'll be
Yeah.
for I or for
We'll say I.
in range,
Uh-huh.
and then we're starting from 0,
Mm-hmm.
and then we're ending in whatever number we choose.
What is the
Where
number? Yeah, how do we
and-
decide that?
Uh,
You
I'm trying
thought
to
you were just gonna
think.
say it and I was gonna do it,
No.
girl. I know.
No, it's because I'm looking and I was like, oh, you're blocking like the instructions. We can go up to, I don't know, 10, -10, -5. I don't know. So it doesn't take that long.
-5. Okay.
Okay. And then you'll go if I is what's the modular? No, not modular. If I is equals to equals wait, let me think. These loops.
Anybody
is
want a
equal
lifeline? Anybody
to-
have any thoughts?
Well, no, because you have up here if it is greater than or equal to 0.
Okay.
That's what you put up here. So, right, greater, yeah, greater than equals to 0.
Okay.
It prints the number, and then you can or else I is equals to 0, right? No, we're trying to get it positive. So, no. What will make it a positive? Even number will be 0. A 1. So we already did. You guys help. Somebody help me.
Like a negative?
I'm trying to think. If it's greater than 0, then it'll be greater than 1 or equals to, not equals to 1. You think is a negative 1, Jeffrey?
Since you're saying else.
Yeah,
That's
because I think because it can't be a negative 0.
Nope.
Because now we're wanting to print big. That's why I'm thinking of what would make it print big.
Okay. Kevin, any thoughts? What are you thinking on this?
Um,
negative 0 number is 1.
let me look at this for a minute. I don't know.
Okay.
This, I think I'm a
Let's
little bit,
let's just stop here. And let's do a T diagram to see what we think is, let's kind of do a T diagram to see what will happen if we just do this. A little T diagram. We're creating a function called make it big that's taking in listy, some sort of list, right? We're saying for I in range 0 minus 5. So now we have this new variable called I, and that's going to be equal to 0. I'm going to put console for my print. So what's going to happen is we enter my for loop, I is 0. We're going to say if I is greater than or equal to 0, which it is, right? 0 is greater than or equal to 0. It's going to print I. I is 0, so it's going to console 0. Then it's at the end of my for loop. It comes up, it checks is 0 greater than negative 5. It is. So it's going to exit my for loop. And this is all I've got. So is this what we want first and foremost? Do we want to just put an arbitrary number here? Or how do we make it dynamic? That way, no matter what list size we put in, we make sure we get the entire list and nothing more or nothing less. What's the tool that we use here? How do we tell how many items are in a list?
Oh, by the index, we're gonna do the start, stop. What is it? Start,
Stop and step.
stop, and there's what's
Step.
the third one? Step. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so we have the start at 0. We need the stop. So when do we want it to stop? When do we want our for loop to stop running? When it's gone through all the items, right?
Yeah.
How do we know how many items are in a list? What's a built-in method that we can use? Or built-in function? Remember, if we want it to be able to go through the entire list, we say the stop is the length of the listy. Or whatever list we have. In this case, we called it listy. This was unicorn, we say the length of unicorn, right?
Yes.
Now we put 0 as our start, but that's implied. So we actually don't even need that. If you have 0 here, it's already going to by default do 0, so you don't even have to put it. Okay. So now let's go ahead and do our T diagram again. I'm going to do a better color that's easier to read. Get our T diagram. We first have I, so I is equal to 0. Now we have this len of listy, so I'm going to say LL for len of listy. And that, in this case, is going to be, you know, if we're using this one, that's going to be 4. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 values there, right? So really it's saying for I in range of 4. That's when we stop. When it gets to 4, that's when we're done. Cool. So now we say, all right, if I, which is 0, is greater than or equal to 0, then we're going to print I. But is I what we're keeping? What does I represent here?
Any
Do we?
number.
I is not representing any number in this case. I is representing the index position. Remember, anytime we use range, all I does is it represents the index position of our list. So we really want the first value to be -1. We have a 0. We have this list of -1, -1, 3, 5, -5. If I have the 0, using that, how do I get that value here? What index position is this?
That's 0.
Yeah, so instead of if I, we say if listy at I. Remember, I is just keeping track of where we're at within my list. So we're saying if listy at position I, so in this case, let me kind of get some of this drawn. If listy at position I is basically saying if listy of position 0, which is -1 in this case, if -1 is greater than or equal to 0. That's not the case, right? Okay, so it skips it. I now becomes 1. So it says if listy of position 1, which is 3, if 3 is greater than or equal to 0, now it enters into my conditional because it is, right? 3 is greater than or equal to 0. But what are we wanting it to do? Are we wanting it just to print 1? We don't actually want it to print anything in that case. What I want it to do is I want to change the value to big. And so what I can say is if listy at position I is greater than or equal to 0, then listy at position I, because I hasn't changed, equals big. Changing that value. Hey, whatever that value is that's greater than 0, let's change it to big. Cool. And so if we're walking through this, if we've got this -1, 3, what is it? 5, -5. What we're going to do is, this is my list right here. Let's pretend that we're starting from the beginning. My length of listy is 4. What my for loop's going to do is it's going to iterate through and it's going to say, okay, great. For I in range, length of listy, so it's going to stop at 4. It's going to say 0 equal or greater than 4. It's not, so it enters into my for loop, right? Okay, it says now if listy at position 0, so I'll say listy at position I in this case, which we know is -1. If that is greater than or equal to 0, then I want to change it to big. Well, it's not greater than or equal to 0. It's -1, right? So it skips it. Now I becomes 1. So L of I, so length of listy is now 3. It says, okay, great. If listy at position I is 1, so therefore 3 is greater than or equal to 0. Well, 3 is greater than or equal to 0. So now instead of 3, it changes the value. Let me just actually make this bigger. It changes the value to big. Right? That's what this does. It says, okay, great. I'm going to increase I. I is now 2. Is 2 greater than 4 or equal to 4? It's not. So then it enters in. Listy at position I or listy at position 2 is 5. And it's going to say if listy at position 2 is greater than or equal to 0. So it's saying if 5 is greater than or equal to 0, it is. So it too will change and say, okay, well, now I want that to be equal to big. So now instead of -1 big 5 -5, I'm going to say -1 big big -5. I then is done running. It goes to 3. Is 3 greater than or equal to 4? It's not, so it stays in my for loop. It says if listy at position 3, which is this one right here. So now that is -5. If -5 is greater than or equal to 0, it's not, so it does not enter here. Then it is done running. I becomes 4. Then it says is 4 greater than or equal to 4? It is, right? Our condition now has been met. It exits my for loop. So the only thing we didn't do in this case is now, once my for loop is done, I print listing. And this will print my new list after my for loop has changed them all. Does that make sense? Let's run it just to check. Oh. Oh, anybody see my error? Why it's not working? It's because I'm still within my function. So I actually never called my function. But that would have been an endless function if I would have called it, because we just kept calling itself. But now if I run this, I get -1, big, big, -5. Let's say that I did 8. I should get -1, big, big, -5, big. And I do. Any questions on this? Does that make sense, or are you guys super lost?
No, it makes sense. It does make sense. See, I think I was just doing it extra steps. because I was
Yeah.
doing if else and
Yeah.
or like whatever. But you in this one you didn't really have to. You just put it like
hmm
if it's not this, obviously it has to be this.
hmm
Okay.
And also just reading the question too, right? If it's not positive, well, then we don't want to do anything, right? So we don't need to have a condition to like, if it's not positive, stay normal. We don't have to put that. It's just, we just don't handle that.
Got it. Okay.
We'll only change the positive. Kevin, Jeffrey, does this make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
The
Yeah,
biggest thing I would
I'm
say
I'm
is
I'm starting to understand it now.
good. Remember, whenever you use range, that means you're going to have to refer to the list and the index position. Always. Range is just a number, 0 through whatever your stop is. Always, right? It doesn't actually represent the value in your list. You have to use it as, okay, listy of index position I or whatever. So always remember, you can't just say I because it's going to be 0 through or whatever your start is through whenever it ends. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. So if we want to reference the actual values, and because we could, the other way to do a for loop is to say something like, for num in listy. But because we wanted to change the value, we need a way to target that index position, right? So that's why we had to use range here. If we just wanted to print them off or create a new array that would be, or list, then we could have used this. But because we wanted to actually change the value at that index, that's why we used range. Cool. Well, I'll have this recording up. Again, just as a reminder, tomorrow I'll send out an email. As long as you're at 90% core assignments, I'll be sending out an email that basically has all of your information and your belt exam code. That code, once you open it, is good for 24 hours. Not once you open the email, but once you actually come up here, say take exams, and you enter the code here, that starts your 24-hour countdown, right? Not when you open up the email, just when you enter the code here. So make sure you do not enter the code until you have ample time to do it. And good luck. Again, I would really encourage, you don't have to, I would really encourage you to do recipes before you actually attempt the exam. Make sure you take a screenshot when you submit your exam just to cover your butt in case anything weird happens. Have that, and I can always advocate on your behalf. If you don't have that and you say, I don't know what happened, I can go to people and be like, oh, they're a great person, but that doesn't mean anything, right? They're going to say, like, well, we don't have any proof. They're going to have to retake the exam. So don't make that happen. Take a screenshot, send me an email. And that's usually, and if you have any sort of issues uploading or submitting your exam, you need to send me an email immediately. Hey, I had some issues. Here's my exam, because that'll give me a timestamp and I can go in and see when you started, the timestamp of the email, and I can grade that exam that you attach to, I can grade that within the 24 hours. That's fine. If you don't attach it and just say, hey, I had issues, and then you wait another 8 hours, and now it's been 42 hours or, 32 hours or whatever, and then you send me the exam, I can't take that or grade it, right? So if you have issues, make sure you tell me the issue you had. If you can, do a screenshot, and then in that, send me the exam. And then, then I can actually grade it. And because on the back end, I'll have to go in and add an exam, and then I can I have an actual valid reasoning. So when somebody asks them, say, here's the issue, why, I can document that. Other than that, good luck, my friends. That's all I have. I'll stick around if you guys have any quick questions, but
Thank you. Appreciate it.
thank you.
I know we're all probably just anxious and nervous about the test, so
Yeah,
I
totally.
yeah, but I'm sure what we put in, we'll get out. So
Yeah, for sure.
I appreciate it. Well,
Of course.
thank you. Have a good night.
You too.